Hey, welcome back to the channel. So if you're new here, my name is Steven, and on this channel we deconstruct the best strategies, tools and frameworks to help us live happier, healthier and wealthier lives. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to cover learning the fundamentals of Webflow, and then we're going to build this sick looking website for the Michael Scott paper company. So without further ado, let's get into it. So before we actually jump into building in Webflow and understanding how the tool works, the most important thing to understand about web design and building on the web is the box model. So essentially, when we're actually building on the web, everything is just a box inside of a box. And once you understand this, building in Webflow becomes so much easier. So if we look at my existing personal website, you can see when I use this little Chrome tool over here, that all we're doing is highlighting these boxes. So you see these red outlines, all of these are just boxes inside of boxes. And that is how you position content inside of Webflow. Once we actually come into Webflow itself, we can see we have the body tag. Now the body tag is like the top box. So on every page you create, there will be a body tag. And inside this body tag is going to be where your content lives. On my website, you can see I have a page wrapper. So this is going to wrap all of the content I have on the page. Then inside of here, you can see we have a few sections. So if I click on this section here, you can see if the one below that is called page padding. Now what this is going to do is add a little bit of padding to the sides. So even when this website is really small, it doesn't kind of span all the way to the edge. As we kind of get a bit further down, you can then see I have a container. This container is smaller than all the rest, and we don't really need to bother about all these settings on the right-hand side yet. I will explain these as we actually get into building in Webflow. The best way to actually explain the box model overall is you see this purple box right here. It is sat inside of this container medium, so it cannot span any further than the container medium unless we set it to do that specifically. So currently the width is set to 100%. So this is a box inside of container medium, and the height is set to 50 pixels. If I change the margin, it's going to kind of create this extra space. If I change the padding, then that means that nothing can kind of come inside of here, and it changes how big the element is going to be overall. The box model is really not that difficult, but for me, this was one of the foundational things that kind of helped me understand how to use Webflow as a whole. And once you understand that everything is just a box inside of a box, it helps you figure out how to solve problems, because the chances are if something's not going into the right place and you need to kind of change the layout of your page, it's probably the box that's containing what you're currently editing that you need to make that change in. Okay, so now let's just get rid of this element and go over how Webflow works as a whole. So there's really kind of three parts to Webflow when you're building inside the designer. Number one is the HTML elements. So this is the actual blocks, the kind of the Lego bricks, the foundations of what you're going to build your website with. So this is where you find your boxes. This is where you find the headings. This is where you find text, images, really any new element that you're going to put on the page. This is where it is. When I'm building in Webflow, you will notice that this kind of box pops up. That's because I'm hitting Command K, and then I can just type in, for example, heading. Once I type this in, it puts it on the page. So that's really just a shortcut and makes it a lot quicker than having to come up into this corner and drag the correct element. When you're first getting started, you will probably need to come up here and make sure that you're selecting the right element, because maybe you don't know exactly what it's called. So all the new elements that you can actually add to the page are over on this side. Remember that if there is something new you're putting on the page, this is where you'll do that. Now over on the right hand side, this is all the CSS. So if I select an already styled element, you can see there is a class up here. So if we want to add a class to this element here, we would click on it, and then we can click in the top right hand corner and then add a little bit of text. So let's just call this class. Now we actually have a different class on here. You can see that none of the styles have been changed yet, but if we were to, for example, change the font, and we change it to this one here, and then we change the font weight and the color. Now what's going to happen is if I add this specific class to another element, it's then going to inherit those same styles. So all a class is a way to create certain styles on your website and then reuse them in different places. That's why when you're actually building a larger website, it's much better to use a defined class structure and have specific classes that you use over and over again for certain CSS properties. So all a CSS property is a different type of style. For example, we want to align this text right here, central, Normally it would be aligned to the left, but we have centered all text like this. Now, as you can see, it's not just the paragraph that's being changed, it's also the heading when I change how this is laid out. We don't just use these class tags up here to change the styling of an element. For example, if I add an image into the page, I can then click on the image itself, up into this top corner, and then you can see there's this HTML tag option. If I select this, it's going to change the styling of all images on the website. So now if I come in here and actually change one of the styles, for example, I remove this border radius, so now the corners are not going to be curved, and then I add an actual border to the picture itself, you can see that when I click off this, there is no new class, but this style has stayed the same. If I add in a new image, that style is still going to be there. So you can do this with every single HTML element that you can actually add to the website. For example, when I changed the heading tags on here, so for H1, you can see that this is a different font to the rest of the website. I just went up here, clicked on all heading ones, and then inside of here you can see that I've set these different CSS properties. So I've set the font different, I've set the weight different, the size, and all of these things. But when I come into here, there is no class added. That is because I'm changing what the actual HTML element looks like itself. Before we actually get into building our own website, I just want to show you around the rest of the designer really quickly so you understand exactly where you would go to find different things. So if you click on the little cog over here, you have a few extra settings on each element that you're selected. There's not loads in here you need to know as a beginner, but this is where you're going to come to the settings for that element. Then you have all the classes, so this is going to list every single class that is on your website. Then you have the interactions. So this is how you make kind of those little fade up transitions and all that kind of stuff. Interactions are more of an advanced thing. They're a little bit tricky to learn, but there is some basic kind of interactions that you can add inside of there. When you come back over to the left-hand side, you can see if you click the kind of little 3 boxes over here, it's going to show you all the elements inside of your page. If I was to click on the heading, for example, I can then click on the little blue box here, and it's going to show me all of the parent boxes up here. So as you can see, text align center, this H1, is inside a box called bottom margin 2, which is inside a box called container medium, which is inside a box called page padding, and so on. So you can really see the box model in play here. It is really just a way to identify where an element is. Then as we go a bit further down, you can see the CMS collections. So this is where you would create a blog and things like that. We have the e-commerce features if you're using that. We have all of the assets. So these are where all of the images from the site are. And then finally, I just missed off the little page over here. So this is going to show you all of your pages, but it's also going to show you all the details for that page. For example, up here, you would add a title tag and then a meta description. And all that is a title that Google sees, a title that a search engine sees, and the little description below that search engine sees. Now, before we actually jump into building our own website, up at the top, you can actually change the device size. So you can see what this website would look like at different device sizes. You have a tablet, a landscape mobile, and then a mobile. This is really useful because you can change the style on the tablet, and those changes only cascade down. So they only go to mobile. They will not go up to the desktop. In the top left-hand corner, you can preview what your website will look like. And then finally, in the right-hand corner, you can actually publish this to your custom domain if you have it connected, or you can just publish it to the little staging domain that Webflow offers you. As you can see over here, when I open this up, it's going to show us what the website actually looks like. It's just going to be on a different domain that says .webflow.io. Now we have a solid understanding of how the Webflow fundamentals work, it's time to actually put this into action and build out this mini website. Okay, so we're going to build this really cool looking website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build using the class system that we already talked about rather than using the template that I normally start builds from. What I'll do is I'll just talk about how I'm thinking about this and the different things that I'm doing, and then hopefully this will be useful for you when you're building your own websites. So the first thing is we need to actually create the website itself. So what I've done is I've created the initial project inside of Webflow, and then I've just uploaded the font that we're going to use. So this is the Michael Scott Paper Company website, and we've uploaded the Comic Sans font. That's the only thing I've done outside the designer. As we actually jump into the designer, the only things I've actually added inside of here are the images that we're going to use for the project. If you also want to build this project, then I'll leave a link to the Figma files and the assets in the description. So inside of here, you can see here are the 4 images that we're going to use when we build out the site. So first things first, I'm going to come into the body tag, I'm going to add in a div, and then I'm going to call that the page wrapper. Inside of here, I'm going to add another div block, and let's call this one the section. So this is going to be, actually let's call it the hero section, because this is going to be the top section. Then what we also need to do inside the page wrapper is add in a nav bar. So if we look back at the Figma file, we're going to see that we have a nav bar, we have a logo, a bit of padding, and then this button over here. So what I need to do is I need to add a class, navbar. So what I'm doing to add this class quicker is command and then enter, called it navbar, and now we're going to take this styling and I'm going to make it white. And as you can see, what's actually happening here is I have it 30% transparent and then a background blur of 64. So I'll create it white, 30% transparent, and then down here we add the backdrop filter, blur 64. Okay, perfect. And then inside of the brand, inside the link, we need to add in an image. Then we're going to select the image of the logo. Perfect. And then inside the nav menu itself, we actually need to add in a button. So this is going to be the button we're going to use. We don't actually have any nav links, so we can remove those. Add a class to the button. Now let's just go find the color for the button and then copy that over. We're going to change that color over here. We're going to add a border radius. So the border radius was 2 pixels. And then there was also a black border of 2. And as you can see, the text on here is not actually currently selected to the right text. So we're going to click on body and we're going to change all the font on the website over to the correct font. So we have Comic Sans, normal, and then we're going to use 20 pixels. We're actually going to set the height to 160%, and then we're going to set the color to completely jet black. Now that's a little bit big for the button, so we'll pop that down to 16, and then we'll also pop the height to 100%. Now we're going to change the padding in here, so we're going to add 12 either side, so you can see the padding's inside the button, and then we're going to add it to 20 pixels of padding on either side. Now you can see that this is a little bit close to the top, and what I'm actually going to do is go into the navbar and then put in a div, and we're going to create our own container. The reason to create your own container rather than use Webflow's native container is that by creating your own container, you can actually set the limits, and there's a lot more flexibility when you create your own containers. So all a container is really just a way to contain some content. The width of our website is 980 pixels wide, and then we'll create the actual width to 100%. So what this means is the max width it can possibly span is 980 pixels, but the width will always be 100% even if it's smaller than 980 pixels. Now what we're going to do is set the margin to auto. This is going to essentially align this container in the center. So both sides to auto, and you can see it's now in the center. We're going to then pull this up to the top in the nav bar and pull all of the elements out of that default Webflow container into our new custom container. So pull everything in there, delete the old container, and you can see now everything is in our new container. What we're going to do now is we're going to add that 16 pixels of padding on here. If you hold Option while you pull this one down, you can see we're adding to the top and the bottom. If you hold Shift, it's going to add to all the sides. So we want 16 pixels here. Now what we're also going to do is add an extra class here, and let's just call it the navbar container. And then we're going to use something called flex. So this is just a way to align a div block essentially. And we're going to have them align at either end, and then we're going to have it align in the center. So that's going to create this in the center of the height of the logo. Now this is going to say contact us. And then let's have a quick look over here. So we've got that background on here, but what we really need to do is create the whole page to be this kind of blue color. So we'll take the blue color, we'll go to the body because we're going to change every single page that we could possibly create on this website. And we could change the background color to this blue. Now you can see it starting to come together a little bit like this one. So what we need to do in here is go back to the hero section that we created a second ago. And we're going to add a little bit of padding. So we're going to add 80 pixels to the top and to the bottom. So let's just drag this until we get to 80. Now inside of here, we're going to add another div. We're going to call this one page padding. So the main benefit of using page padding like this is that if someone is on a small device, there's still going to be padding at the sides, no matter how much smaller they make the screen. So for example, we make this smaller, there's always going to be 64 pixels of padding either side of the content. So what we'll do is we'll go inside of the page padding itself, add in another div block, and this one is going to be our container, so we can use an existing class, and that's going to align in the center. Now, with this hero section up here, you can see that they're actually a piece of text, so two pieces of text this side and then an image over here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a combo class, and I'm going to call this just flex. So this is going to, again, use the different layouts. We're going to create flex. We're going to basically justify them to either side, and then we're going to align that to the top this time. Then we're going to add in another div, which is going to act as a wrapper for our text. So let's just call it hero text wrap. Now we're going to add in the heading and add in a paragraph. So you can see that is now contained inside of hero text wrap. In the container, we're going to add in the image as well, and we'll select that as the image that we're using. And we're going to give that a class of hero image. As you can see, that's starting to come together. So let's copy this. So let's have a look at how wide this is. So 520 pixels. So currently it's a bit too wide. So we'll add max width 520 pixels, width 100%. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to go into all H1s, remove the margin from the top and the bottom. And then we're also going to just make sure the font is kind of the right weight and the right size. So we're going to 42 pixels. And let's create this as 130%. So when it is percentage, all that means it's going to be the percent is relative to 42. So 100% of this would be 100% of the size. So it would be 42 pixels in height. 130 is, I don't know what that is. Not good enough at math. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add bottom margin to this one and add a little bit of breathing room below. So we're going to add some margin. Remember, margin is kind of outside and padding is inside. So you see, if we added 200 pixels of padding inside, it's inside the element, whereas this is outside of the element. So let's get rid of this one. And then we've got the hero section along here. Don't need to add anything onto this one. So all looks good. Let's add that background image that we have. So we're going to go into hero section, image to the background. Choose image and then select the main image that we're using. As you can see, this is not aligned properly. So what we need to do is we need to click contain, because we would want to contain this one image. We want to click position center to the top, and we do not want to tile because we only want to show one image rather than the image over and over again to fill that space. Now we've got that hero section created. So let's create a second section. So let's click on page wrapper. Add another div, call this one section 2. And section 2 does not need any padding at the top because we got that up there, but it does need 80 pixels of padding at the bottom. Now inside of here, you can see there is just a couple pieces of text inside the kind of 680 pixels. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to add a div, page padding again. That way it's going to be inside that page padding. We're going to put another div block in here, and we're going to call this one container small this time because it is smaller than the other container that we're using. We're going to put the max width as 680 pixels, width of that 100%, and then the margin on both sides is going to be auto. That way it's going to be centered. Now inside this container small, what we're going to do is we're going to add another heading, and then we're going to add a rich text block. So we're going to change this heading over to heading 2 rather than a heading 1, because we should only ever have one heading 1 on the page, and that is going to tell Google what this page is about. So inside of here, we're going to remove these stylings again. So we're going to remove that margin, remove the margin on the bottom and the top, which automatically comes with Webflow. We're going to set the actual pixel size to the correct pixel size. As you can see, it's exactly the same as heading 1. 130%, and then normal. Now we're going to go into here, and we're actually going to add its own specific class. Let's just call this heading 2. And what we're going to do is we're going to center this text and add this in here, and we're going to add a little bit of margin between these down here. So heading 2's now going to have 24 pixels of margin below. Now in here, the rich text section, all this is just a way to add different types of text inside of here. So we can add paragraphs, we can add headings, we can add images, really anything you want. This is kind of like a blog post. So rich text is pretty much anything you want to add in there that's like text-based or an image. So we're going to copy these into here. We're going to just format that correctly. So we've got, now that's formatted correctly. The only issue we have is the spacing between here. So we could go into select all tag, all paragraphs, and add the margin below here. But what we're actually going to do is we're going to add a class to the rich text element. We'll just call it rich text. Now we're going to click into the paragraph again, select all tags, but then select nested selector inside rich text. So this means that we're going to add margin to every paragraph that is inside a rich text block, but not any of the other paragraph blocks. Now this is looking pretty good. The only thing left for us to do now is this bottom call to action section. So I'm going to go into the page wrapper again, add in a new div block, call this one section 3. Now with section 3, we need a bit more padding on here, I think. So we have 148 either side. So we'll add 148 pixels. And first thing we'll do is add the image in the background. So we're going to go backgrounds, image, choose image, and then this fantastic image of Michael Scott. We're going to center that. We're going to contain, actually no, we're going to cover, and we're not going to tile this. So currently it looks slightly off, but this will change once we actually put the content in here. So we're going to add another div. It's going to be page padding. Inside of here, we're going to add another div. We're going to call this CTA, so call to action, wrap. And this is going to be 520 pixels. 100% width. 100% width. And it's going to align to the center. Now this over here needs a little bit of padding. So we're going to have 24 pixels. Let's go 24 pixels all around. So if I hold shift and drag this, it's going to change all of them. The background for this is white, 80% white, and a background blur of 6. So what we'll do, background color, drag it to white, 80%. Background blur, so add the backdrop filter, and that was of 6. So that's done. Now we need another heading. So let's drop heading 2 in there. And then we're also going to drop a button. What we're going to do with that button is add the class button that we've already created. So that's perfect now. And then we're going to add the text contact us. This one will add the text by our paper. Now what we need to do is grab this color, and we're going to create a new class. And let's just call this one CTA heading. And we're going to add the styling in here. So we'll add color. We will make sure that is center aligned. And we also are going to add 40 pixels of margin. So you might be thinking that to center this button over here, we would add margin auto, but you can see it actually doesn't do anything. It doesn't push it either side when we add margin auto, and that's because we're displayed as an inline block. So the best thing to do here is to actually go to the parent element, so that is the wrapper, and then click flex, and then go vertical. Then what we want to do is click align center, and then we can justify it to the top. So that is now going to center this because every element we add is going to align to the center and be stacked vertically. Looking at this, I think we've just about built everything. The final thing for us to do is to actually link up the contact us button. So let's add an email address. Let's call it Michael. There we go, Michael at themichaelscottpapercompany.com. And add that down here. Now, finally, the last thing I'm going to do is just create a tiny little interaction on the button itself. So on this button, what we can do is click this drop down and then hover. So now what we're doing is we're styling what the CSS will look like when someone is hovering over this button. So what I can do now is go down to transform, click move, and then I'm going to change the Y to, let's change it to -8. Now what we're also going to do is add in a box shadow. Let's make it really obvious and really, really out there. So let's add black, let's do it 80%. And a little bit of blur with a lot of distance. Now what we do if we click off of here, you can see if we click in preview mode, this hover interaction is happening, but it is a little bit janky at the minute. So what we will do to create this interaction is click back on the button, make sure we're not selected on hover, make sure we're just on the normal button, go down to here, down to transitions. You can create a transition for a specific thing, but what we're going to do is create a transition for all properties that we've added. 300 milliseconds, click off of here, preview, and you can see a little bit smoother now. So, a delightful user experience. Now all we have left to do is publish this. Now, as you can see, when we click over to the website, we now have a great website for Scranton's best paper company. Little button up here, click this, it's going to try make you send an email to Michael. Of course, the one thing we should be doing before actually publishing this live is making it device responsive. So if we were to make changes on the smaller device over here, what we would do is, for example, we could go into this flex container up here. So let's select flex container, this one. And we could stack this vertically if we wanted to do this. We could change how this is laid out. For example, we could just randomly add some margin, things like that. And as you go back to this one, it's not going to change it at all. It's only going to change the ones down here. We don't have enough time to cover this fully in this video, but if you are interested in this kind of thing, let me know and I'll create some more in-depth videos on how to use Webflow. Obviously, there's so much more to cover when we're learning Webflow, but hopefully this video gave you an understanding of the fundamentals of building in Webflow. The thing I'd recommend doing next is to just jump into the tool and then start building your own websites in there. The best way to learn is always going to be by doing it yourself. If you found this video useful, then let me know in the comments, and also let me know if there's any other videos you'd like to see from me. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.